This season is brought to you by the Working Garden Project. Did you know that 74% of employees struggle to disconnect from work? The significant percentage say that their job negatively impacts their mental and social well-being. And many employees are considering leaving jobs that don't support their overall health. They need solutions. And based on all the positive benefits that we know that can come from nature, nature can be one of them. The Working Garden Project is a nationwide effort to bring the benefits of nature and communal gardening to workplaces across the country. To learn more about how to bring the Working Garden Project to your company, head to workinggardenproject.com. Whether your company is big or small, the Working Garden Project has solutions to create more happiness, engagement, and productivity in the workplace. Again, that's workinggardenproject.com. Hello, I'm Jessica Moran, and this is Inside and Outside. I'm a horticultural therapist and writer who is equally obsessed with nature and pop culture. So on this podcast, we talk about one outside thing, which involves gardening, nature, birds, and then my guest shares an inside thing, like pop culture, news, food, and fashion trends they're obsessed with or hate, or any current weird inside obsessions. One quick note before we get to today's guest. When I used to teach people how to do podcasts, I would drive home the importance of consistency. Like, consistency is one of the most important things about a successful podcast. And I've been so bad at consistency this season. I know I missed a few weeks, and I'm dealing with some family and personal things right now that's been hard to be consistent. I wrote a whole book about all my personal things, so I will spare you the details about this one. Just know that I'm working hard to get back to this being a weekly schedule, I promise. And even if I missed a week, this episode is worth like 5 episodes because our guest today is so good. I'm talking to biologist, author, and 2-time finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in Nonfiction, George Haskell. He has written a lot of books, has won a ton of awards. I will include all his books and bio in the show notes. It's just incredible how much he's accomplished. I just recently discovered his work through his latest book, How Flowers Made Our World. And after reading the first page, I immediately reached out to see if he would come on the show, and I'm so grateful he said yes. In this episode, we discuss the biological reasons we're attracted to flowers, how we peg flowers as just being pretty and cute, but they have such a significant role in creating our world and keeping our world moving. We talk about women in the horticulture space, and then he leads us through... You know what? I'm not going to tell you about it. It is so beautiful. I wish you could have seen my face geeking out the whole time. My smile was so big listening to him, so I will let that be a surprise for you. And then his inside pick is actually an outside pick, so I give David a little pop culture inside quiz. You can find everything we talked about at baskergardens.com. You can also find ways that we can work together there, whether it's workplace well-being or teaching you how to grow flowers. I want everyone to grow flowers, whether you grow them from seed or buy them from a store. All right. Oh, wait. Tonight is our first ever garden club meetup. It's virtual. You can join from anywhere. All experience, no experience is welcome. Even if you don't have a garden, you just want to be friends with gardeners, please come. You can still sign up for that if you're listening to this before 7 p.m. Eastern time. That is at baskergardens.com, and in the corner, if you click on current workshops, you can find the garden club. All right, we're finished. For real. Here's my conversation with David. David, welcome to the podcast. It was very, very hard to narrow down what I wanted to talk to you about. This is not Brosphere podcast where we spend 3 hours talking about stupid things. Like, I could talk to you for 3 hours about this, but I've narrowed it down. I just want to start with, as we sort of frame this conversation, how do you define a flower? We're going to be talking about flowers today. So let's define what it is.
Yeah, so for me, there are two different meanings. One is the thing that most of us are familiar with, the kind of sexy part of a flower. It's got the petals, it's got the aromas, usually male and female parts in the center of a bowl of petals of some kind. And of course, that's the reproductive structure that then matures into a fruit. But then another meaning is, and this is one used by biologists, is flower means flowering plant. So all the leaves and the roots and the physiology inside the plant that ultimately is serving the reproductive parts, because of course all creatures on the planet are eventually going to try to pass on their genes. And so a leaf, in a way, is a way of producing food to help grow flowers, to send genes and seeds on to the next generation.
Okay, thank you. Because I think, when we say the word flower, I think people think of a peony or a rose, but we are, like your book covers, grasses, seagrasses. It really opened up my mind to what the word flower actually means. And one thing that struck me so much that I've told a handful of people already about is you talk about the idea of flowers. You talk about this time that you had at a bar where a bartender didn't put a flower in your drink because you're a man, which is absurd. And then you go into the idea that when we talk about certain type of language, it's flowery language, or that there's really no colognes that have, like men's colognes that have flowers really highlighted in it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've never really thought about this in this way, that these flowers that we talk about, they're seen as kind of trite or just beautiful or girly, but you really explore the true power of flowers. And can you talk a little bit more about this?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so it's in our culture right now, you're absolutely right. We tend to box flowers into a pretty limited set of symbolic roles. And that wasn't always the case. I mean, the kings of France and of Britain use flowers as their symbols of dominion, right? And that's entitled masculinity right there, being a king. And the imperial symbol of Japan is the chrysanthemum. So again and again, we can see flowers represented in other cultures and in other times in other ways. But right now, we're hiding an essential truth from ourselves: is that flowers, of course, they're beautiful, uh, and yet they also are world changers. That beauty is not just sort of skin deep and kind of ephemeral and of no importance to the world. They built most of the habitats that including human agriculture, that we and the rest of the living world depend on. And then in our own culture, I think we also sort of limit ourselves if we just think, oh, flowers are just for girls, right? Which is, well, a flower is the most biologically bisexual thing there is, right? It's producing both pollen and eggs. And so the floral structure, which is mostly talking to insects, trying to seduce insects to come in and take the pollen away, is both male and female. And we might translate that loosely into masculine and feminine in the human realm, although, of course, human gender is a lot more complicated than just, it's pollen and eggs in flowers. So it's not obviously a direct one-to-one correspondence. But as a young boy, it was, if I mentioned any interest in flowers, that was the surest way to get beaten up. I mean, literally, the sort of ideas of masculinity were pretty vigorously enforced by fist. And now, I'm not surrounded by people like that. And it's okay to grow flowers and to take pleasure in them, and also to be myself, which is, a heterosexual guy. So flowers for me belong to all genders, and we should all be able to enjoy and celebrate them. And as a biologist, realize their amazing, world-changing, revolutionary power, which is a story that I love because it goes so against often how we peg them in our culture as just kind of pretty and ephemeral and not particularly significant.
And I think what was such an interesting contrast to that, too, when we're talking about them as being more feminine, is that a lot of time in the horticultural space, that so many times a lot of women are saying, like, okay, at these shows or at these big horticulture
Mm-hmm.
places, like, we're seeing men as the dominant force, leading the speaking, leading all of the different demonstrations. So it's okay. So they're all flowery and like girly, but then we're not going to invite the women to talk about them. It's
Yeah,
such an interesting contradiction.
it is. And, and it's taken different forms, say, in the 19th century, in North America, in parts of Western Europe. Studying flowers was actually one of the few ways that women could actually engage in scientific study and the study of natural history. So in a way, flowers kind of opened the door in that way. I mean, not just flowers, but all plants. And of course, those are the women who could afford to do that and who were had the privilege, of course, of having access to some kind of free time or education. So it tended to be the aristocratic white women who were the studiers of flowers. And then you fast forward to the present day, and there are a lot of women leaders in the horticultural
For sure.
world. But then, yes, when you go to a horticultural show, you realize, oh yeah, when it comes to the business of making money, a lot of the leading voices are men. And I think it's great that both men and women and people who don't identify as either are involved in all aspects. But as in many other parts of our society, the patriarchy is absolutely still alive, even in the flower world, which anyway, that's just a reminder of the power of that.
Yes. As a biologist, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the biology of our attraction to flowers. You go deep into this in the rose chapter, which every chapter I was like, oh, I think this is my favorite chapter. But then the rose chapter, it really, really spoke to me. So could we talk a little bit about that attraction? Because I think we've all, we give flowers for special occasions. We give flowers for love. We know that we like them, but why?
Mm-hmm. And in particular with roses, it's not just how they look, but how they smell. And one of the delights in researching this book was going to southern France and visiting some of the traditional rose breeders. And there's a museum that has a living museum of all the different plants that are used in perfumery. And smelling these roses literally is sort of an ecstatic experience because it takes you out of your body, at least for a few seconds. You're kind of floating in this beautiful space, which, if you look at a rose petal under a microscope, the top and the lower surfaces of the petals are basically living aroma diffusers, little conical cells filled with aromatic oils. 400 different kinds of aromatic molecules come off the surface of those petals. And the curious thing is that we humans, even though we're not bees, we're not butterflies, we're still attracted to them, even though we're not pollinators. I mean, it's pretty obvious why a bee is attracted to flowers, right? That's where it's going to get its food and then collect pollen to feed to its babies. Whereas we generally are not eating roses, except maybe some rose petals on a nice dessert, something like that. And yet, we've built an industry that is literally hundreds of millions of dollars a year to appreciate and to bottle rose perfume so we can put it onto our bodies. And so that's puzzling. Other aromas and things that we're attracted to in our life have more practical utility, like the smell of good food is going to nourish us, or the smell of a nice clean house is a nice, safe, healthy place to be, or the smell of a baby's head, or of someone we love. That's connecting us to our kin. And yet roses, where do they fit into this? And I think there are several different layers. One, and this seems a little odd though, is that a rose in a way is an indicator of a good habitat, of being in a healthy place, all concentrated into one packet. So humans and our pre-human ancestors for millions of years have been attracted to places that are lush and leafy and so full of food. And a lot of those aromas that are present in low concentrations in leaves and in healthy forests and meadows are gathered in incredible concentration in flowers. So it's almost like, some synthetic drugs and so on give us a really crazy high because they're mimicking the low doses of drugs in our body. Like if I go for a run, I get some opiates that make me feel good afterwards. Well, I can go and get a pill. I mean, I shouldn't do this, but if I took a pill of opiates, it would give me this incredible rush. So incredible that, it's addictive. flowers are like that, except in a sort of healthy realm. They're giving us this intense experience of connection to plants, all gathered into a small space that we can actually carry with us as perfume or in a scented candle or something that connect us back to our ancestral home, which is out there with healthy plants. We don't find swamps or garbage heaps or other kind of habitats attractive because they're not healthy for us, right? Other animals like flies and swamp rats and things are attracted to those habitats. And maybe if they made perfumes, they wouldn't have roses. They'd have, the smell of, stinky swamp mud. But for our habitat, we're attracted to those nice, fresh floral aromas. So that's one thing. It's sort of this atavistic attraction to our ancestral homes. And then occasionally, floral perfumes could be used. There's one hypothesis that they're used as a mask, like I'm going to cover my body odor or unpleasant smells as a mask. But actually, the research shows that most of us pick aromas for perfume, aftershave, deodorant, whatever it is, that actually complement the aromas of our own body. So we're combining our aroma with the aroma of other creatures, mostly plants, to produce this chimeric, this being, this hybrid creature that is part human and part plant. And it sounds very sci-fi, but we do this every day. If you just put on a shirt that has flowers on it or a floral dress or some floral perfume, we're expressing our identity, our individuality by merging ourselves with flowers. And so that's another part of our connection, our yearning for connection to nature, I think. And
sorry, I'm just so excited about this. Keep going.
Yeah. Just one last thing, some of the molecules, and this is pure speculation, but if you look at the lists of molecules, aromatic molecules that are present on human skin, and then in flowers, there's some overlap. So some of the perfumes that we get from flowers are actually mimicking and boosting some of the aroma chemicals coming from our own skin. Does that make us feel more confident or more sexy or what? We don't know. Certainly, culturally, we know that perfumes make us feel all kinds of emotions. In terms of scientific proof of that, really, we're not at that point. So perfumes are this delightful portal into the mysteries of human psychology and ecology.
Yeah, I just loved, I think what I love so much about that is I mean, you are a researcher, you're a scientist, and I think sometimes to be able to understand the why almost gives us permission to play more, to explore more. Flowers aren't just beautiful things. They give us so much more than just that.
Yeah. And, for me, every flower has stories behind it, right? So a rose, think about roses. Where did they come from, right? Who first domesticated them? Who invented floral perfume made by roses? To me, knowing a little bit of those stories enriches my experience of the everyday. So a rose isn't just, oh yeah, it's a pretty thing. No, as I'm looking at a rose, I'm thinking about Chinese horticulturalists who bred roses for thousands of years, and then they, through trade, interacted with European rose breeders and hybridized them. So most of the roses that we'd grow in our gardens or find in a grocery store or in perfume are actually a merger of the ingenuity of people from Asia and from Europe and from South Asia as well as from China, merged over the centuries, and we get to enjoy that in a spritz of rosy perfume. So it feels like a deeper experience.
Yes. So before we move inside with your inside pick, which is actually an outside pick, which we'll get to, there is a very special part where in your book, where you help people explore flowers in a different way, in a new way, maybe that they've never done before.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll have to say, having a pretty shitty day yesterday, and when I came to that part of your book about this idea of being with the flower and really looking at it, just reading that made me feel better. So if someone is listening right now and they want to do one thing tomorrow or even today, can you walk us through that exercise a little bit of being with a flower?
Sure. And I'm sorry you had a bad day, and I hope the flowers and it can lift,
It did.
lift
It
your
made me feel
spirits
so
up.
much better. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank the flowers. They're the ones who are doing, this work of bringing joy into our lives. Yeah, so the last chapter of the book is all about playful, joyful ways of interacting with flowers with our senses turned on. Some of them are making perfume at home, or pressing flowers, or exploring the inner structure of flowers. Taking the orchids on your windowsill and pollinating them so you get some orchid seeds. But the simplest and the most powerful is sitting with a flower, as you mentioned. And I'd encourage listeners to do this is just in the next few days, find a flower somewhere. It could be a cut flower on your kitchen table, or it might be a flower in a park or in a garden or a window box, and sit for just as long as you can, 15 minutes, maybe just 5 minutes, or maybe even a whole hour, and consider the world from the flower's perspective. To whom is this flower speaking? And which insects is it trying to communicate with? And what senses is the flower using? So aromas or colors or contrast in the shape between the flower and the leaves to advertise its presence. So again and again, and this is sort of a floral meditation, if you like, come back to the flower as your mind wanders onto other things, as our minds always do, and come back and consider the world not from a human-centered point of view, but from the point of view of flowers, and see where that curiosity will take you. It might ask questions about how did the flower get here? With what people brought this flower to this continent, or maybe the flower evolved here over millions of years. So every flower has its own story of origins and of dispersal, just as we all do as people. And then maybe let your imagination roam into the invisible communication of the flower. So every flower has a special electric field around it that is unique to its species of flower. The electrical field is shaped by the form of the petals. And bees and hoverflies can pick up that electrical field with special hairs on their bodies. We can't measure this stuff unless we bring the flower into a physics lab, but we can imagine the communication going on between the flowers and the bees, and then the flowers in their roots and all the fungi and microbes below ground. And in fact, some flowers have been shown to communicate between one another about when pollinators arrive or when insects are attacking the flower's leaves. So there are all these invisible communication networks and channels that just sitting with a flower and opening our imagination allows us to slip into that world and sort of become the flower. I don't mean that in any sort of deeply mystical way, although if you get there, that's great. But for me, sitting with the flower is more as a way of unself and getting out of my own head for a little while and just sitting in this place of this beautiful other being and imagining its multifarious connections with others.
The biggest smile on my face right now. Thank you so much for walking us through that. That is just amazing. So like I said, we do inside things and outside things because I like to merge pop culture and horticulture together. Your inside thing is a little cheaty because it's still outside. Yeah. I'm going to let you have it. But before we do it, I am going to ask you a few real inside questions. If you're cool with
go
this.
for it. I may not have any good answers, which is why my original answer was a cheat. I'm pretty clueless about a lot of stuff.
All right. Let's just go with easy. Last meal that you ate.
Was some lettuce that I grew in the community garden here with some bread and cheese and just a nice simple lunch.
Okay. When I say the words Team West or Team Sierra, do you have any idea of what I'm talking about?
No, I know what a team is, and I just sort of know which direction West is, but no.
It's from a reality show called Summer House, which is in all of the news right now. Last TV show that you watched?
Last TV show that I watched, Industry, about those sort of traders, both young and older traders based in London, and all they're basically screwing each other over, which is in a way is like being in there are cooperative networks and there are and there are networks that are full of conflict. And to me, that is like what biology is like. It's
Mm.
like you go out in the woods, and yeah, some trees are cooperating, others are trying to kill each other. Half of the animal species on the planet are parasites, and half are living in deep cooperation with others. It is, I mean, biology and ecology are soap operas. And so when I'm seeing like an actual, I guess I don't know if it's just if you'd call it a soap opera, but
Uh-huh.
it's a series filled with drama, a fair amount of sex, a little bit of death. Um, and, it's just, I love seeing those parallels between the more than human world and the human world. It reminds us that we're part of this bigger drama, right? We're
Yeah.
not so special.
Wow. I love that you even connected industry to trees. Song that must be on a playlist.
Oh, I mean, so Simona Dinestein, who's a Brooklyn-based, and she travels all over the world, amazing uh, pianist playing Bach, is
Mm.
my go-to. She has some other Gnossienne and arabesque and so on. So I've been listening to that CD way more than I need to. I mean, when I was young, I really didn't listen to so-called classical music that much, but now particularly, pianists who are really playing some of those beautifully multi-layered pieces are just really extraordinary. And particularly when the outside world is just, I mean, every week it just seems to get more insane and troubling.
Yes. Yes.
Find not that Western culture was not. I mean, had plenty of troubles back in Bach's day, but hearing that music played by an amazing musician like Simona Dinestein to me is just a source of joy and beauty in this world.
I love it. Okay. And last question. Favorite museum? It has to be an inside museum.
Woo. Okay, I would say, the Met in New York, although I find the Met actually also very troubling because there's a lot of sort of cultural, here's all the loot that we gathered from around the world without asking people's permission and stealing it,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of fracture, but also there's just such some parts of the Met. And I think if you go up on the fifth floor, and I think this is still open, there's an area of stuff that they don't have on display, but it's basically all the things like the spoons and the candle holders and things that they haven't put on display, but they just got kind of warehoused up there. And you
Mm-hmm.
can look through all this, just a diversity of ways that humans have expressed themselves in all sorts of media, like, in silver, in paint. The collection of musical instruments is extraordinary. So when I go to New York, I almost always go to the Met and just pick a random direction
Mm-hmm.
and walk and just spend some time in that gallery. Obviously, they have amazing exhibits that sometimes, make a special trip there. But just to delight in the ways in which people from all around the world have expressed themselves feels really renewing. And often, I don't write about, um, 18th century European painting or, the art of silver. But just being in those spaces often for me solves problems. Like, say, I'm writing an essay about, seagrasses or roses or magnolias. Things will start to click in my head because there are all these parallels. And so, as someone who spends a lot of time in the sort of creative realm trying to craft interesting and entertaining essays, being in a museum like the Met for me is really actually feeds me. So
Mm-hmm.
entertains me, but in this way that I cannot explain because it's often just totally out of left field answers or parallels, or, oh, I should really include a chapter about this species in this book. And like, where on earth did that idea come from? It's just being in the presence of so much human creativity, I think, kind of like fires up things in the subconscious and the nervous system that is useful.
Wow. I love that. Thank you so much. So when we do our inside thing, the categories are TV, book, or movie, internet gossip you must discuss, wild card. And you
Yeah.
went with wild card. What are
Yeah.
you sharing with us today?
Just the weeds growing in my driveway and my love of native plants. I mean, this does connect actually to social media because there's a lot of
Okay.
people kind of arguing about
Ooh.
what's the best way of growing native plants, and particularly around plants that don't live on this continent, like that didn't originally come from here, like Bradford pears and privet,
Mm.
that are kind of pushing their way into lots of native ecosystems and, creating ecological problems. Some people are really like saying, I hate these plants. We should just tear them down. And I'm like, okay, I've spent a lot of time, including with my students, cutting down privet to make room for native wildflowers. So I'm all for managing some of these species, but I think we should do it in a respectful way. Like, even as we're cutting the plant down, it's like, okay, we humans brought these plants to North America from Europe, from Asia, to use in our gardens, to use in agriculture. Some of them came here by accident as part of global trade. We are the ones who brought them here. So let's not hate the plant. Instead, let's admire how the plant is really tenacious and resilient. It evolved that back in its home country. It's adapting to this new continent. Even as we're sort of pushing back against some of these, as we should, we need to make room for the plants that are indigenous to each of our continents. But so the social media arguments about that get really heated.
The heatedness is native versus not native. Is that what you're saying?
It's native versus not native. So that's one thing. Some of the old school horticulturalists are like, if you are into native plants, you're a Puritan. You're imposing puritanical nonsense on the rest of the world. And, if you're rewilding your garden, it's going to offer nothing but straw and hay for most of the year. And this is literally people, on social media, but also giving expert witness to governments, right? So it's like,
wow.
oh my goodness. And then you got other people who are like, oh yeah, and then native plants are definitely the way to go because it brings more life and vitality back to our neighborhoods. So there's a lot of heat around that. But even around, okay, so there are some non-native plants like kudzu and privet and Bradford pears that are kind of have spread and have become problematic in some places. I would prefer people didn't bring such a hateful attitude towards the plants themselves. Yes, we need to, I'm all for removing kudzu from a lot of the South, right? We need to honor Southern plants and not just have kudzu everywhere. But also, man, kudzu is so impressive. It stops erosion. It fixes nitrogen, so it's actually enriching the soil. And those vines can grow so fast. You've just got to admire the physiology. Doesn't mean we shouldn't control it. And to me, we need a more respectful attitude towards all of the living world, including the parts of the living world that we're kind of, literally cutting down to make room for others. So there are two kind of controversies, and they do play out on social media, and people get really...
I can't even imagine. I see it play out in person at the plant store. I can't even imagine how gross and heated it is on social media. Yeah, it's funny. I'm glad that you brought this up. One of the sections I underlined was we should be careful about building xenophobic walls through our gardens. Native plants good, immigrant plants always bad, and instead think at a community level. Because I do think with the native thing, I think one of the biggest issues is there's a lot of us just don't know how to design with them yet.
Yeah, and I agree, but I also think we're in this time, this really amazing time, in that there's this revolution of knowledge. Some of it is rediscovery of knowledge, but also really sophisticated thinking within the horticultural and sort of landscape design, garden design world, in which people are answering exactly that question. How can we have beauty that both pleases humans and is feeding the rest of the local ecology, right? And Rebecca McMacken has got a strong social media presence and has a great...
She did a beautiful job on the Brooklyn Museum Garden. Is that
Brooklyn Museum? Brooklyn.
Yeah, I actually
Park.
saw her speak here like a few months ago, and I was so impressed with her work.
Yeah, and Doug Tallamy, Benjamin Vogt, there are a bunch of people sort of celebrating native plants, both sort of out in the wild, but also in places that we manage. And this is, to me, the revolution is in our conception of beauty. Is beauty in our gardens just to serve us, or is it also beautiful because it's feeding other beings? And I think those two are 100% compatible. In fact, they're not just compatible, they're synergistic, right? So in my garden, I've got plants from Europe because they remind me of where I came from. I grew up in France. I was born in London. I've got plants from Asia that were given to me by friends who've now died, and that's how I remember them. So I'm definitely for let's have a few plants from other places to celebrate our own individual connections to the rest of the world and to just celebrate the glories of botany all over the world. But the foundation of the garden should be species that evolved in the place, because then the bluebirds in my backyard are feeding 3 broods of babies a year, and I've got bees and butterflies. And to me, that's like beauty plus. So yeah, some of the native grasses don't look, in the winter don't look quite as pretty as the sterile garden mums that I could go buy from a big box store. But I've got goldfinches feeding in their seeds, and I know that these are plants that in the spring are going to feed all the butterflies and so forth. So thinking about beauty in that more expansive way without being, and I think there are very few people in the native plant movement who are total purists, right? I mean, if you're restoring a nature reserve, yeah, sure, but you don't be planting just exotic things in the middle of that. But in most people's backyards are this interface between things that are very cultivated and don't provide much sort of ecological benefit, and then other things that are actually more connected into local ecologies.
You're so right, because someone like Doug and Rebecca, like, I think generally they like to do a 70-30 rule of 70% native. But again, going back to social media, it's usually those loudest voices of like, everything has to be native. That's like, it kind of makes it a little bit muddy about what you're actually, or what people might enjoy doing.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, that's the thing with social media, is that the algorithm literally amplifies the outrage, right? I mean, that's how we got into the political moment we're in. Well, one of the reasons. And it happens in all these other areas. The algorithm is picking up on the outrage in the gardening world, which is, to me, is just sick. It's like, how can these, our connection with the electronic world be changing how we, making us angry about gardening? I mean, that's not a good outcome. I mean, on the plus side, it's an indication that people are passionate and they really care.
Yes.
On the negative side is we all need to, and I need as much as anyone else to remember to, okay, if I'm feeling really self-righteous and angry about something, maybe the problem is me as much as the other person, and I need to dial it down and not lose myself, but be true to my own convictions, but also open to listening to other people, because I might actually learn something from that.
Yes.
So.
Wow. So I know you're not ready to write another book yet, or maybe you are.
Yeah, I'm itching to
because you've covered trees, you've covered flowers. What is the next plant space that has got you excited?
Yes. Well, flowers, there are 350,000 species of flowering plants. So I could spend multiple lifetimes just pulling out the stories of each, even, just looking at a few, the so-called weed species I'm really attracted to, because often, people hold them in contempt, but they actually have really interesting stories associated with them. The other thing, and I don't know if I wind up writing about this, but is thinking about dreams and plants, not just plants, but dreams and the modern human world in general. I keep a list of all the non-human creatures that I encounter in my dreams.
Whoa.
Right? You know the way birders have a checklist for all the birds they've seen in their backyard?
Yeah.
And actually, I've got one of those checklists too, but because I find birds just so wonderfully uplifting. But the dream world, in the Western tradition, often we regard it as it's just a bunch of junk. It's your brain flushing itself out. There's not much meaning there. Of course, the psychoanalytic tradition sort of takes it into the realm of symbols and so on. But for many cultures around the world, the dream world is a place where we actually receive knowledge from the modern human world, in particular plants. And that's intrigued me for years and years, ever since, it's more than a decade ago now. I was in the Amazon, part of the Amazon with some traditional healers who got a lot of their knowledge about the healing powers of plants from dreams. I mean, also from their elders and through careful study of the world. But they didn't dismiss dreams as just irrelevant. And I don't want, I'm not an Amazonian elder or anything like that, but I do find that's an interesting question of what is the natural history of dreams, and when did dreams first evolve, right? Do bumblebees dream when they're sleeping in a flower?
Whoa.
My dogs and cats certainly dream, right?
Yeah.
If you've seen a dog having it's the most peaceful thing I've ever seen in my life is a dog lying down in front of a wood stove on a cold winter's day, deep in sleep, having this and sort of wagging their tail as they're having this fun little dream and their eyes are flickering. It's like, okay, we need more of that kind of peace in the world.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, that dog is dreaming. It's not just for humans. So what's going on there? So that's a whole other book that has been brewing in my head for decades, and maybe one day I'll write it.
Wow. Well, sign me up for the Weeds book or the Dream book, because those sound incredible. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I encourage everyone to check out How Flowers Made Our World. It is absolutely exceptional. Even if you're not a flower person, just the history and the stories are just amazing. So thank you so much for writing it.
Thank you, Jess. It's such a pleasure to be with you. And we're all flower people.
Yes.
And we're eating flowering plants. So those are some of the stories. I'm a proselytizer for flowers here.
Thank you so much. That's today's show. If you like this episode or any of the Inside and Outside episodes, please leave a review. You might not think it helps, but it really does. It helps you get into the little algorithm better, and also lets advertisers know that you enjoy this show. All right, on Apple, here's how you do it. Go to the homepage, scroll all the way down to the end of the episodes, and you'll see something that says rating and reviews. Hit that 5 stars, write something. Just say love it if you want to. On Spotify, go to the homepage of the show. You'll see a little tiny gear icon. It'll have a drop down that says rate this show, leave 5 stars. There you can't even write anything. And that's it. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for listening to the show, and I'll talk to you next week.